December 16, 1944, 5:30 hours. The Ardennes Forest, Belgium. An eerie silence blankets the snow-covered landscape where American forces hold a thinly stretched defensive line. Suddenly, the darkness erupts with the thunder of 2,000 German artillery pieces unleashing a devastating barrage along an 85-mile front. Trees explode into splinters. The frozen earth heaves under the bombardment. American positions, caught completely by surprise, disintegrate under the onslaught. Behind the artillery curtain, 250,000 German soldiers surge forward through the forest, infantry, tanks, and assault guns advancing through the morning mist. 3 German armies, meticulously assembled in absolute secrecy, launch Adolf Hitler's most desperate gamble, a massive counteroffensive designed to split the Allied armies, capture the vital port of Antwerp, and potentially force the Western Allies to negotiate a separate peace. The attack achieves complete tactical surprise. American units, many composed of green troops resting after the brutal Huichen Forest campaign or inexperienced divisions holding quiet sectors, find themselves overwhelmed. Within hours, the German spearheads penetrate deep into American lines. Panic spreads. Communications collapse. Entire battalions are surrounded and cut off. The carefully orchestrated Allied advance toward Germany grinds to a halt as commanders scramble to understand what is happening. This is the Battle of the Bulge, the largest and bloodiest battle fought by American forces during World War II. Over the next 6 weeks, in brutal winter conditions, nearly 1 million men will fight across the snow-covered forests and villages of the Ardennes. The battle will cost 19,000 American lives, shatter German military power beyond recovery, and demonstrate both the desperate courage of soldiers fighting in impossible conditions and the catastrophic consequences of Hitler's strategic delusions. The strategic situation, autumn 1944. By December 1944, Nazi Germany faced inevitable defeat. Soviet armies advanced relentlessly from the east, having liberated most of Eastern Europe and reached the borders of the Reich itself. In the west, American, British, and Canadian forces had broken out from Normandy, liberated France, and reached Germany's western frontier. Allied bombers pounded German cities and industry around the clock. The Luftwaffe was a shadow of its former strength. Fuel shortages crippled military operations. German armies retreated on all fronts. Yet Hitler refused to accept reality. Throughout the autumn, as his generals pleaded for a defensive strategy to husband dwindling resources, the Führer conceived an audacious counteroffensive. He would strike the Western Allies, exploiting what he perceived as coalition weakness. A decisive blow might shatter Allied unity, perhaps forcing Britain and America to seek terms, allowing Germany to concentrate all forces against the Soviets. The plan, codenamed Wacht am Rhein, Watch on the Rhine, was breathtaking in ambition and detached from military reality. 3 armies would attack through the Ardennes, the same region where German forces had achieved their stunning 1940 breakthrough. The offensive would drive northwest toward Antwerp, Belgium's vital port through which most Allied supplies flowed. Capturing Antwerp would cut off British and Canadian forces in the north, potentially destroy 30 Allied divisions, and buy Germany time to deploy new weapons Hitler believed would turn the war: jet aircraft, advanced U-boats, and perhaps atomic weapons. Hitler's generals understood the plan was fantasy. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, commander of German forces in the west, and Field Marshal Walter Model, commanding Army Group B, considered the objectives unattainable. They proposed more limited alternatives, pincer movements to destroy isolated Allied forces rather than the grandiose dash to Antwerp. Hitler rejected all modifications. The offensive would proceed as he dictated or not at all. The German army scraped together forces from across the Reich. Panzer divisions were withdrawn from the Eastern Front. Volksgrenadier divisions, filled with teenagers, overage men, and convalescents, were equipped and trained hastily. the 6th Panzer Army under SS Obergruppenführer Sepp Dietrich, the 5th Panzer Army under General Hasso von Manteuffel, and the 7th Army under General Erich Brandenberger assembled in the forests east of the Ardennes. In total, approximately 410,000 men, 1,400 tanks and assault guns, and 2,000 artillery pieces concentrated in absolute secrecy. Secrecy was essential. Radio silence was maintained rigorously. Troop movements occurred only at night. Units assembled under cover of extensive forests. Allied aerial reconnaissance, hampered by poor weather, detected nothing unusual. Allied intelligence, confident that Germany lacked resources for major offensive operations, dismissed scattered reports of German buildups as local defensive preparations. The Ardennes sector seemed the least likely place for German attack. The terrain, heavily forested, crossed by narrow roads and deep valleys, was considered unsuitable for large-scale armored operations. 4 American divisions held an 85-mile front, an impossibly wide sector that would normally require 12 divisions. But this was a quiet sector, used to rest veteran units and blood-inexperienced divisions. The 106th Infantry Division had just arrived from the United States, many soldiers having never seen combat. The 28th Infantry Division was recovering from the meat grinder of Ardennes Forest. Nobody expected the Germans to attack here. The German plan, desperation and delusion. Operation Wacht am Rhein relied on multiple factors aligning perfectly, an impossibility in war, but Hitler believed his will could impose order on chaos. The 6th Panzer Army, containing the elite SS Panzer divisions, would strike on the northern shoulder, drive through the Elsenborn Ridge, cross the Meuse River, and race for Antwerp. The 5th Panzer Army would advance through the center, cross the Meuse near Namur, and wheel northwest. The 7th Army would protect the southern flank against American forces in Luxembourg. Special operations would support the main assault. Kampfgruppe 150, commanded by SS Obersturmbannführer Otto Skorzeny, comprised German soldiers in American uniforms driving captured American vehicles. These commandos would infiltrate American lines, seize bridges, spread confusion, and assassinate officers. Operation Stürzer would drop paratroopers behind American lines to seize key road junctions and create chaos. The plan assumed Allied forces would collapse when struck. Hitler believed American soldiers were soft, their coalition fractured by national rivalries. He expected British and American commanders to bicker while German spearheads drove deep. He dismissed concerns about Allied air superiority, gambling that winter weather would ground Allied aircraft during the critical opening days. He ignored the logistical impossibility of his plan. German forces had fuel for perhaps 3 days of operations, expecting to capture American fuel dumps as they advanced. Most critically, the plan assumed the Americans would not fight effectively. Hitler's assessment of American combat effectiveness was catastrophically wrong. December 1617, the storm breaks. At 5:30 hours on December 16th, the artillery bombardment shattered the winter morning. American positions erupted in fire and smoke. For 90 minutes, German guns pounded the thinly held American lines. Then came the assault waves, infantry advancing through the pre-dawn darkness, supported by tanks and assault guns. The initial German attacks achieved dramatic success. In the north, the 6th Panzer Army smashed into the inexperienced 99th Infantry Division and elements of the 2nd Infantry Division. Some American units broke and fled. Others fought desperately but were overwhelmed. The 106th Infantry Division, positioned in the Schnee-Eifel salient, found itself rapidly surrounded as German forces advanced on both flanks. Kampfgruppe Paper, an SS battle group commanded by SS Obersturmbannführer Joachim Paper, drove deep into American lines. Equipped with Tiger II tanks and mounted in half-tracks, Paper's force was the spearhead of the 6th Panzer Army, tasked with reaching the Meuse River within 48 hours. They advanced rapidly, brushing aside scattered American resistance, capturing fuel dumps and racing westward. In the center, Manteuffel's 5th Panzer Army achieved even greater success. His forces penetrated deeply, exploiting gaps in the American lines. The 28th Infantry Division, spread across a 25-mile front, could not hold everywhere. German forces punched through, surrounded American strongpoints, and pushed westward toward the key road junction of Bastogne. The 7th Army in the south made slower progress, but succeeded in screening the main assault's southern flank, preventing American forces in Luxembourg from interfering with the primary thrusts. American commanders struggled to comprehend what was happening. Initial reports were fragmentary and contradictory. Some headquarters believed the attacks were local counterattacks. As the scale of the offensive became clear, Lieutenant General Omar Bradley, commanding the 12th Army Group, and Lieutenant General Courtney Hodges, commanding the 1st Army, began organizing responses. But communication with frontline units was sporadic. Many battalions were cut off, fighting isolated battles without contact with higher headquarters. On December 17th, as German forces pushed deeper, a war crime shocked even the brutal standards of WWII. Kampfgruppe paper captured approximately 150 American prisoners near Malmedy, Belgium. The prisoners were herded into a field and machine-gunned. 84 Americans died in what became known as the Malmedy Massacre. Survivors who escaped spread word of the atrocity. The massacre hardened American resolve. Soldiers who might have surrendered now fought to the death, rather than risk capture by SS troops. The critical shoulders, ELSMBORN and ST, VITH. While German spearheads pushed west, American forces on the northern and southern shoulders of the penetration fought desperately to contain the assault. These battles, less dramatic than the siege of Bastogne, were equally critical to the battle's outcome. At Elsenborn Ridge, north of the main German advance, elements of the 99th Infantry Division and the 2nd Infantry Division fought with unexpected ferocity. The twin villages of Krinkeltrachterath became scenes of brutal house-to-house fighting. American soldiers, including many experiencing combat for the first time, held against repeated German assaults. The Elsenborn Ridge, vital high ground overlooking the northern approach routes, never fell. This defensive success channeled German forces southward into increasingly congested roads, disrupting the carefully planned advance timetable. At Saint-Vith, a critical road junction in the center, American forces mounted an equally determined defense. The 7th Armored Division, rushed south from the Netherlands, arrived just in time to reinforce remnants of the battered 106th Infantry Division. For 6 days, from December 17th to 23rd, American forces held Saint-Vith against overwhelming German pressure. The defense was ultimately hopeless. German forces surrounded the town and battered the defenders with artillery and armor. On December 23rd, surviving American forces withdrew westward, but those 6 days were invaluable. Every hour American forces held Saint-Vith delayed German divisions needed elsewhere. The defense disrupted the 5th Panzer Army's timetable, buying time for Allied reinforcements to arrive. The 106th Infantry Division suffered catastrophic losses. 2 entire regiments, the 422nd and 423rd, surrendered on December 19th after being surrounded in the Schnee Eifel, approximately 8,000 men, the largest American surrender in Europe during World War II. But other elements of the division, fighting desperately around Saint-Vith and elsewhere, contributed to the battle's eventual outcome. KMPFJRUPPPIPER, the DEPEST penetration. Joachim Paper's battle group represented Germany's best hope for breakthrough. Equipped with Tiger II and Panther tanks, mounted infantry, and aggressive leadership, Paper drove deep into American rear areas. On December 17th and 18th, his force advanced over 50 miles, approaching the Meuse River. If Paper could seize bridges across the Meuse, the entire Allied position might collapse. But Paper's advance created its own problems. His rapid progress stretched his supply lines. Fuel ran low. The narrow roads of the Ardennes, clogged with destroyed vehicles and choked by forests, prevented the follow-on forces from keeping pace. American resistance, though scattered, forced Paper to detour repeatedly, consuming precious fuel. American engineers, reacting with remarkable speed, demolished bridges ahead of the German advance. At Trois Ponts, American engineers blew the bridge as Paper's lead tanks approached. At Staumont and Chenu, American forces established blocking positions. The 82nd Airborne Division, rushed south from rest areas, moved into position north of Paper's penetration. The 30th Infantry Division deployed forces to contain the German spearhead. By December 19th, Paper's advance stalled. He lacked fuel to continue and faced increasing American pressure from all sides. His battle group, the deepest German penetration of the offensive, was isolated and surrounded. On December 23rd, Paper abandoned his vehicles and led his remaining men back through American lines on foot. Of his original force of 5,000 men and 150 tanks, fewer than 800 returned. The 6th Panzer Army's hopes died with Kampfgruppe Paper. Bastogne, the siege that defined the battle. As German forces surged westward, the small Belgian town of Bastogne emerged as the battle's critical point. 7 roads converged at Bastogne, making it essential for German logistics. Without Bastogne's roads, German forces would be confined to inadequate secondary routes. On December 17th, recognizing Bastogne's importance, General Dwight Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander, ordered the 101st Airborne Division to Bastogne. The division, resting near Reims, France after Operation Market Garden, scrambled to load onto trucks. Without their full equipment, lacking winter clothing, the paratroopers raced north through the night. They arrived just in time. On December 19th, the 101st Airborne, commanded by Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, reached Bastogne and established defenses around the town. With them came elements of the 10th Armored Division and other scattered units. Approximately 18,000 American soldiers prepared to defend Bastogne against overwhelming German forces. German forces surrounded Bastogne by December 21st. The 5th Panzer Army needed the town's roads desperately. Manteufel assigned the 2nd Panzer Division, Panzer Lehr Division, and 26th Volksgrenadier Division to capture Bastogne. They attacked from multiple directions, probing for weaknesses in the American perimeter. The defenders fought desperately. Artillery, critically important in defensive warfare, broke up German attacks. American tank destroyers stalked German armor. Paratroopers, elite infantry, held their positions despite shortages of ammunition, food, and medical supplies. The weather remained terrible. Overcast skies prevented aerial resupply and close air support. On December 22nd, German commanders sent surrender terms to McAuliffe under flag of truce. They warned that continued resistance was hopeless and would result in Bastogne's destruction. McAuliffe's response became legendary. He replied with a single word, "Nuts." When the puzzled German officers asked for clarification, an American officer explained, "It means go to hell." The siege continued. German attacks increased in intensity. By December 23rd, American casualties mounted. Ammunition ran critically low. The wounded filled every available building. German artillery pounded the town relentlessly, but the defenders held, buying time for the Allied counteroffensive being organized. The tide turns, Allied response. By December 20th, Allied commanders had organized an effective response. Eisenhower met with his senior commanders at Verdun on December 19th. The meeting demonstrated Allied unity rather than the discord Hitler expected. Eisenhower asked one question: the present situation is to be regarded as one of opportunity for us and not of disaster. There will be only cheerful faces at this conference table. General George S. Patton, commanding the Third Army, responded he could attack north within days. Patton's boast seemed impossible. The Third Army was fully engaged in operations in the Saar region, south of the Bulge. Turning the army 90 degrees and attacking north over winter roads required logistical miracles. But Patton had anticipated the need. His staff had prepared contingency plans. On December 22nd, elements of the Third Army attacked north toward Bastogne. In the north, Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery assumed command of American forces north of the German penetration, a controversial decision but militarily sound given the disrupted American command structure. Montgomery deployed British reserves to screen the Meuse River crossings, ensuring that even if German forces broke through, they could not cross the river. He also began planning counterattacks from the north to squeeze the German salient. The weather, which had favored the German offensive by grounding Allied aircraft, finally cleared on December 23rd. Allied tactical air forces swarmed over the battlefield. Fighter bombers attacked German columns, destroying tanks, trucks, and supply vehicles. C-47 transport aircraft dropped supplies to the Bastogne garrison. The siege continued, but the defenders could hold longer with resupply. Christmas 1944, the high water mark. On December 24-25, German forces made their final desperate attempts to achieve breakthrough. The 2nd Panzer Division reached Celles, Belgium, just 4 miles from the Meuse River, the deepest penetration of the offensive. But they advanced without infantry support, low on fuel, harassed by Allied aircraft. American forces, including the 2nd Armored Division, surrounded and destroyed the German spearhead. By December 26th, the 2nd Panzer Division ceased to exist as a fighting force. At Bastogne, Christmas brought the fiercest German attacks. The 15th Panzer Grenadier Division and elements of the 9th Panzer Division assaulted from multiple directions. In brutal close-quarters fighting, American defenders repelled the attacks. That same day, December 26th, Patton's Third Army achieved the impossible. The 4th Armored Division, spearheading the relief force, broke through German lines and reached Bastogne. The siege was lifted, though fighting around the town continued for weeks. The German offensive had reached its maximum extent. Fuel exhaustion, Allied air superiority, stubborn American resistance, and overstretched supply lines doomed further advances. The Bulge, the salient driven into Allied lines, stretched 60 miles deep and 60 miles wide, but it was a salient surrounded on 3 sides by Allied forces. Hitler's gamble had failed. January 1945, crushing the Bulge. The Battle of the Bulge's second phase involved Allied forces methodically crushing the German salient. In brutal winter conditions, American and British forces attacked from north and south, squeezing the Bulge. German forces, ordered by Hitler to hold their positions rather than withdraw, fought desperate defensive battles. The fighting was savage. Villages changed hands multiple times. Tank battles erupted in frozen forests. Infantry fought through waist-deep snow. Casualties mounted on both sides. The weather remained terrible. Temperatures plunged below zero, causing frostbite and hypothermia. Soldiers died from cold as often as from enemy fire. By mid-January, Allied pressure had compressed the German salient. On January 16, 1945, American forces attacking from north and south met at Houffalize, Belgium, cutting the Bulge in two. German forces retreated eastward, harassed by Allied aircraft and artillery. By January 25, 1945, Allied forces had recaptured all territory lost during the offensive. The Battle of the Bulge was over. The cost, blood in the snow. The Battle of the Bulge was the costliest battle in American military history. American casualties totaled approximately 89,000, 19,000 killed, 47,500 wounded, and 23,000 captured or missing. The 106th Infantry Division was virtually destroyed. Numerous other divisions suffered catastrophic losses. Entire battalions ceased to exist. The human cost was staggering. German casualties were equally severe, approximately 67,000 killed, wounded, or captured. More critically, Germany lost equipment it could not replace: 800 tanks and assault guns, 1,000 aircraft, 6,000 vehicles. Elite SS panzer divisions were shattered. The Luftwaffe's fighter force, committed to supporting the offensive, was decimated by Allied fighters. These losses came from Germany's last operational reserves. The losses were irreplaceable. The offensive achieved nothing. Antwerp remained in Allied hands. The Western Allies were not split. Their coalition remained solid. If Hitler intended to force negotiations, he achieved the opposite. Allied determination to crush Nazi Germany hardened. The strategic consequences were catastrophic for Germany. Resources squandered in the Ardennes were desperately needed on the Eastern Front, where Soviet forces prepared their final offensives. When the Red Army attacked in January 1945, German forces lacked reserves to contain the breakthrough. The road to Berlin was open. Lessons and legacy. The Battle of the Bulge demonstrated multiple military truths. American soldiers, many inexperienced, fought with unexpected tenacity when the situation demanded. Units surrounded and outnumbered held their positions, disrupting German timetables. The defense of St. Vith, the stand at Elsenborn Ridge, and the siege of Bastogne showcased American determination. The battle vindicated Allied operational flexibility. Within days of the attack, Allied commanders redirected entire armies, shifting forces across hundreds of miles of winter roads. Patton's Third Army wheeled 90 degrees and attacked within 72 hours, an extraordinary feat of staff work and logistical execution. Allied air power, once weather cleared, proved decisive. German columns, vulnerable on exposed roads, were slaughtered from the air. The battle revealed Hitler's complete detachment from military reality. His refusal to allow retreats turned defeats into disasters. His strategic vision, divorced from logistical and tactical reality, squandered Germany's last reserves on an unwinnable offensive. His generals, complicit through obedience, shared responsibility for the disaster. For individual soldiers, the Battle of the Bulge was a nightmare of cold, confusion, and chaos. Men fought in sub-zero temperatures without adequate winter clothing. Frostbite caused more casualties than enemy fire in some units. Soldiers went days without hot food. The wounded suffered terribly in the cold. Medical facilities were overwhelmed. The psychological toll was enormous. Soldiers fought in isolation, cut off from their units, unsure if they would survive the next hour. The battle produced remarkable acts of heroism. At Malmedy, despite the massacre, American soldiers fought on. At Bastogne, paratroopers held against impossible odds. Throughout the Ardennes, small units fought desperate battles that disrupted German plans. Thousands of individual acts of courage, never recorded, contributed to the Allied victory. Conclusion: Hitler's final defeat. The Battle of the Bulge was Hitler's last gamble, a desperate attempt to change the war's course through audacity and surprise. It failed comprehensively. The offensive delayed Allied advances by weeks, not months. It cost Germany irreplaceable resources needed for the defense of the Reich. It demonstrated that American soldiers, when properly led and supplied, were formidable opponents. The battle's immediate aftermath saw Allied forces resume their advance into Germany. By March 1945, American forces crossed the Rhine. Soviet armies approached Berlin from the east. Germany's defeat was now simply a matter of time. The Battle of the Bulge accelerated that defeat by squandering Germany's last mobile reserves. For the soldiers who fought in the frozen forests of the Ardennes, the battle remained a defining experience. They endured some of the worst conditions of the war and emerged victorious. The veterans of the Bulge earned their place in military history, not through easy victories but through grim determination in desperate circumstances. The Battle of the Bulge stands as a testament to the courage of soldiers asked to hold impossible positions against overwhelming odds. It demonstrates the catastrophic consequences of strategic delusion divorced from operational reality. Most importantly, it reminds us that wars are won not by brilliant plans alone, but by soldiers willing to stand and fight when everything else has failed. In the frozen forests of the Ardennes, in winter 1944-1945, that willingness to fight determined the outcome of Hitler's last offensive, and ultimately, the outcome of World War II in Europe.